I'm a dad, and I got issues. Lots of them. This is for, primarily for my kids, but it's for anybody out there that needs a little direction or wants to hear one more approaching middle-aged white guy rant about his opinions. But I'm hoping that people can get a little bit out of this. If something happens, I don't want my kids to not understand exactly what I stood for. And right here, in front of God and everybody on YouTube, this is what I stand for. The first issue I have is Donald Trump saying he's the president of the people, for the people. I'm sure by the people, whatever. I just don't understand how that's true. And there's a lot of groups out there that I plan to run down in no particular order. Do I think one's more important than the other? There's a lot of issues that are very important. At the end of the day, it's all equality, right? We need to treat each other as equals. I'm no better than any other man, and no man should think he's better than I am. So I'll start just because it is first and foremost to me in my situation as of right now, sitting in this truck driving somewhere between the asshole and the armpit of Wisconsin on a 5-day run, which I don't think I'll make it home until tomorrow. I'm doing this. Been gone since Monday morning, 3 a.m. It makes me good money, and it's a good job. It's hard work, believe it or not. But I'd rather be home most every night with my family than be gone. Just so you know. The reason that I'm not is I was a farmer. And I was a farmer for a few years, and there was a lot of things that happened that took me out of farming and put us on the verge of bankruptcy, which I'm fighting tooth and nail, just so everybody knows, to avoid, because I'm responsible for my debts. I'm responsible for everything I do, and you are too. And you can deny that to yourself, but deep down you'll know, and it'll rot you to the core. I'm telling you. Weather sucked for a couple of years where I lived, produced poor yields. Some people broke some promises that really kind of stung me pretty good. And some companies broke some promises. And I made my fair share, if not more, probably more, definitely more, than my share of mistakes. Now, that said, the nail in the coffin for me was the tariff war with China, which started in March of 2018. And you know how I know that is because I was going to forward market some beans, soybeans, and it was something like $11.25 a bushel. I was kind of hinging upon, and the tariff war started, and seemingly overnight, beans went down to sub $8 per bushel. So I farmed roughly 350 acres. That's a lot of money for me, and a lot of people out here. That cannot stress that enough. That you take $4 off of $11.25. That's let's just roughly a quarter of your income. Take a quarter. Had a phone call. It was the boss. So, no clue where I was at. Oh, tariffs. Losing a quarter of your gross income, not profit. So gross income. So, if it cost me $200,000 to put in a crop, and I got $260,000 some thousand left over, that's great. But if I'm under 200,000, not so great. Anyhow, I digress. Where are the tariffs now? September 25th, 2020. All the problems we have in the world, where are the tariffs now? Now China's buying more. We need the money. They need the beans. Who's in power in China? It's going to be who's in power in China for a long time. It's the same way with Russia. Here, they know they can wait us out. So in essence, what they did, and if anybody wants to say about the government funding that the farmers get, well, the neat little trick that they pulled on that funding was they made it off of per bushel. It was going back in the cobwebs here, but something like $2.65 a bushel. Well, who does that help and who does that hurt? Well, if you've got a lot of bushels and a good crop that year and you're already doing good, you get more. But if you don't have a good crop and you're not doing good, you get less. So, from where I can stand, I don't see why farmers support it. So let's move on to minorities. We start with African Americans, which Donald Trump has self-proclaimed to be the best president for African Americans, other than the toss-up of that guy. What was his name? He got rid of slavery, you know, when the blacks were slaves. Oh, Abraham Lincoln. You know, it's neck and neck there at the gate, or at the finish line. Yeah, it's not. So, there is plenty of people that are smarter than me that put together research and papers that show that a lot of the wealth of this country came from slave labor, primarily black. And as far as the people who benefited from the labor, got ahead, the people who did not benefit from the labor and actually regressed them more than they already were for the next, I don't know, hundreds of years. And I'll allow you to decide who benefited and who did not on that. I do not understand, especially since yesterday the young lady that got killed in what was it, Kansas? Shot and sleeping. Accident, but still no justice. And George Floyd. And God, there's a million. But just African Americans this year. And it's disgusting, really. I don't know. So is Donald Trump for and of minorities, African Americans, Native Americans, any culture or race, honestly, and the list goes on. Veterans. Is Donald Trump for veterans? Of veterans? Well, you know he's not of veterans. He's not a veteran because he was one of the lucky few that survived the horrible bone spur disease that he had that kept him out of going to Vietnam, like my father and my wife's father, who were drafted and had no choice because they had no choice. And millions of other men that went over and had to fight. 163,000 rings in my head, but it doesn't do justice to the fact that those men died because they weren't affluential makes no apologies for it. And that pisses me off. That they died, and the guys that did not die had to watch guys that died. And I don't understand how veterans can support that. He opted out of what they had to go through. And on top of that, he mocked, ridiculed, and I swear if he was allowed to, defile a military hero. Also an affluential guy who spent most of, what, 4 years hanging in a POW camp by his shoulders, and then went on to serve the rest of his life in the United States government. And be that what it may, whatever his views were, as they changed as they got older, whatever side he was, if you agreed or did not agree with him, he was still a military hero. He was still an American hero. And hell, he's my hero. He should be yours too. With those two facts alone, I don't know how you can support Mr. Trump. Donald Trump. Second Amendment. It's a big one. I know. Is he really with you? All right. First off, nobody's going to take your guns. It's not what they want. Well, we'll take all the other shit with them too. A well-regulated militia, right? Right to bear arms. Most of us kind of get the gist of what the Second Amendment is, right? So there's a lot to unpack on this one. When that was written, what do we have? Pretty much muskets, chainmail, maybe some cannons, artillery, small, black powder. Okay, what did the government have? Same thing. So, when it's a right to bear arms, you have the right to bear arms. A well-regulated militia. Who's gonna form this well-regulated militia, and who's gonna get anybody to agree on a damn thing? And who's it gonna be comprised of? Like realtors, dentists, salesmen, farmers, mostly what? Middle-aged guys that, even if you have a gun, which I have plenty of guns, and they're never going to protect my guns, because first of all, how am I going to find them? Like, I can hide them. Like, I hide things. Like, they're not coming to get them. Why would they? They don't give a shit. Like, what are you going to do? Like, take Grandpa's shotgun and get with Tom, the physician, and Bill, the manager at the department store, and go and line up and take this tyranny down? Okay. We have a heat gun that feels like your skin's on fire. We're going to use it against you. We have tanks. We have nuclear weapons, right? This was before. This is when we were on a even playing field, because everything was just started. We're not on an even playing field now. And on top of all that being said, you have a gun, and you're forced in a situation that you got to look at somebody and pull the trigger. How many people can do that? I'm not sure if I can. Protecting your family, probably pretty easy. But I don't think you can really understand that moment until you're in that moment. And who wants to be in that moment? They're not taking your guns. They're not. Why would they take your guns? You're like a wet noodle with the guns that you have compared to the guns, armor, and resources that they have. That's it. It's the money, it's not the guns. Women! Is Donald Trump of women? For women? Well, there's a long line of stuff out there already that everybody already knows. We don't have to get into the grabbing and the bragging and the wives and the whatever. Just recently, RGB, the notorious RGB, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passed away. God rest her soul. A mountain of a personality for justice for everyone and women's rights. Yet he's selling t-shirts saying fill that seat 5 damn days after she died. Shows you a lot of respect. Well, I mean, the man did publicly on several occasions warn on his own daughter, which is creepy and creepy. Christians. Is Donald Trump of the Christian community, for the Christian community? There's so many Christians that back him because of his non-bending philosophies on what they stand for. I don't understand it. You see, I spent a little time in the good book. I would not consider myself any more Christian or not Christian than the next person. So, when you look at Donald Trump and you look at Jesus, to me you're looking at polar opposites. Because the way that I interpret it, the way that it's explained to me, and the way that as a Christian are supposed to live is, all right, if you're a Christian, you believe Jesus died on the cross for your sins, all right? End of story, kind of, all right? But you can't just believe that without believing what Jesus said about to act how he acts, live how he lives, which is impossible because he lived the perfect sinful life according to the Christian Bible. So when people say, let me explain this to you, walking in step with the Spirit, I don't know how many people understand that, but what it does mean is you've heard the message of Christ, and I'm not evangelical, whatever that word is. I'm just explaining it to you how it works. So, when you walk in step with the Spirit, you've heard about Jesus, you've accepted Jesus, and it's a big freaking and you're doing everything that you can to live and act like Jesus. And then, like, every once in a while, when you're being pure and whole and praying and looking for guidance and acting like Jesus, Jesus is the Spirit above it, now that he's been resurrected. He, for as far as I can see, the Spirit of him comes down. You're walking down the street, and he comes, and he's right in there with you, and you're walking in step with the Spirit. And that can only be self-evident through your actions. So let's take Donald Trump's actions. Not words, actions. I would challenge anyone to argue with me, and I know that's baited at least, that Donald Trump is is walking in step with the Spirit, or trying to. Turn that down. LBGTQ community. I don't think I even have to explain that. The elderly are the elderly of Donald Trump. Well, he's part of one of them. But is he for them? He recently said that the coronavirus is basically non-existent, and the only people that it affects are old people. It's great. You're not old. Well, pre-existing conditions, but mostly nobody at all. There was, but, 200,000 Americans as of this day, September 25th, 2020, have died from coronavirus, or died from the effects that coronavirus made on other complications, ailments, and diseases that they have. 200,000 is the third leading cause of death in our country today, this year. And it's virtually non-existent. And the numbers of it was only 10,000 or 6%. Those were the ones that died solely, and on the autopsy and death certificate were printed that it was coronavirus. It didn't count the ones that had diabetes or COPD or asthma or a million other things, and then they got coronavirus and they couldn't cope with what they already had because they had coronavirus, so they died from coronavirus. That makes sense. Refuting Obamacare, which coincidentally was Ted Kennedy care before it was called Obamacare, which was in an election year, and everybody voted because it was the thing to do. But yeah, at any rate, get rid of that. What's going to happen to Medicaid, Medicare? What's going to happen to these elderly? How can you be elderly and be with him? Teachers. Department of Education. Is the Department of Education with Donald Trump? Is he of them? Well, let's see. Private schooling. So, when nominated or when appointed, who did he appoint as the head of the Department of Education? Betsy DeVos, a heiress that's married to an heir to Amway and all of its money. You know what Amway is? It's a pyramid scheme, and they made billions of dollars on it. She's never been to private school that I know of. One day in her life. Yet, that's who you have to watch over the private, or excuse me, the public school system. And then, throughout her appointmentship, I'll make that word up because I did, she blatantly takes money of U.S. taxpayers, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter who you are, U.S. taxpayers, that are earmarked for public schools and the Department of Education, because the public schools and the Department of Education, they have to abide by certain regulations and rules. Teachers have to hit certain standards, and kids have to have certain test scores and able for them to get the funding for the student. Except if you're private, you don't have to adhere to any of the public or standards. You don't have to accept any of the kids if you don't want to, because you're not obliged to do it because you're private. So why? This is Betsy DeVos in a situation where some private colleges received public education money to bail them out. when you give public money to private entities, what's your story and why does it matter? What about the individuals on the West Coast that are without homes? Is that all Antifa? Did they do that? Just to, I mean, if there's one thing that they're going to do that's really going to bring the whole country to its knees, is light a bunch of dry kindling in the Pacific. It just doesn't make no sense. There's no monetary gain, there's no political gain, there's no gain at all. So the fact that forest management needs to be done, it does. But that's not the sole reason. Not at all. So, case in point, the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, that BLM, the original BLM, in their 2021 budget, you can look this up online, PDF, it's 100 some pages, I think. I perused through it. They did allocate, or ask for the allocation of $112 and change $million for active forest wildfire prevention. I think you can figure out how I botched that, which is great. But the fact remains that they also asked for $116 million and change for wild horse and burrow studies, which we all know has been all over the news and is a huge problem. And on top of that, if you factor in, I think the U.S. Forestry Service was recommending, with something equivalent to that, it's a drop in the bucket. Like, the United States government owns half of the land in California and Oregon. Half. 80 million acres. And from everything that I could find, which, please, I'd like to find more, they're asking for what comes out to be less than $1 an acre to fight wildfires. Now, seeing as how that on the other end of the spectrum it costs about $700 an acre to correctly put in an acre of field work. I'm not saying that it's anything the same thing. It just seems to be a tad bit underfunded and under $1 an acre. It's like getting the drunk guy at the bar and paying him to go out and piss on an acre of dead, downfallen kindling and call that forest fire prevention. He's going to run out of resources awful damn quick. And that's a joke, obviously, metaphorically, but it's the truth. You can't fight with no money. So that's not an all-exhaustive list, but it's a list of quite a few groups of people that say that they're with Donald Trump, or he says they're with them, that make no sense to me. It leaves out other groups of people, mainly the wealthy and the super wealthy, and before you judge them, they should be treated as equally and fairly as anybody else. That's not the point. That's not what I'm saying. The fact is, even if they are being treated equally, all those other groups that I mentioned are not. So that, by default, creates inequality. Now, what do we do about this? Is Donald Trump, of the people, for the people, by the people? I guess it's for you to decide. Primarily, I'm shooting this video so my kids know, without a doubt, definitive, that if something happens to me, that they know exactly where I stood on these issues. And really, the other thing is, everybody else gets to tell me I'm wrong, or why I don't understand anything, or why I don't know anything, and why all the other things are right, and they have a voice, because it's America, I have a voice. So here we go, we're going to get in to Donald Trump, bring it over, buddy, in the United States, yeah, bring it over, is he, with each one of these examples, truly with, of, and for these groups of people? And obviously I shot this in less than desirable acoustic conditions or visual conditions while I'm driving down the road, and I'm sure somebody will chime in to say that it's dangerous, but really, is that what you, if that's what you took from this, you missed the mark by like forever. That's not the point. It's no different than chatting to someone next to you, which everybody does every day, and how I watch people texting and driving past. So please, open your heart, open your eyes, open your minds, treat everybody equal, give everybody a chance. It's what we all deserve. It's been a dad with issues. A lot of issues.